Hey guys, it's Bowser Jr. You can see right there. There's my bib. Right there. You can tell I'm Bowser Jr. Look. Just look at me. See? Alright, so we're acting to Rip Toys R Us. What? Ah, dang it. My favorite store.
Please tell me that's you.
Going.
What do you mean? Dad and I are still at the restaurant.
What?
Oh God, I think there's someone downstairs.
This is a dumb commercial.
Recently, you probably heard that Toys R Us is closing many of their stores in the United States. The initial list from January listed a very important Toys R Us to me, the one in Coral Springs, Florida, which I decided to visit today.
Oh.
Why is this one so important? Well, many of my videos were shot
Florida,
here, including my first Just So Good video. Actually,
it.
right in this aisle is where that took place. The video was about the new 2012 LEGO Star Wars sets. Either way, I heard of crazy store closing deals, but there were none present at this Toys R Us.
I don't think this is...
almost felt as
right
if
here. That was a good one. Google, blah, blah, blah. All of these. McDonald's.
The big news story of the week in the business world is that Toys R Us has filed for bankruptcy.
What?
I've been getting quite a few requests to make a video about it, and I completely agree. This is a terrific subject to talk about. So, I dropped everything I was doing and dove right into it. Keep in mind that this video is being made the same week as the announcement, and it's sometimes hard to see the full picture from such a close distance. So don't be too harsh if you're watching this sometime in the future and I say something that sounds a little foolish. So, what's going on with Toys R Us? If you're like me, you had no idea they were in any kind of trouble and were shocked by the news. And I'm guessing your next thought was a quick judgment that it must be a result of the internet taking sales away from the store locations. I would even bet you clicked on this video anticipating to hear that. And I don't necessarily disagree with that conclusion, but I guarantee that what's happening with Toys R Us right now runs much deeper than losing sales to Amazon. In 1948, a man named Charles Lazarus opened a baby furniture store called Children's Bargain Town. The company's...
Okay, so guys, what I'm thinking, Lazarus, okay? This is how he made Toys R Us. That's how he made Toys R Us, because the R was in his name. I get it. That's how he made Toys R Us.
Started selling toys, and the demand for them grew. Mr. Lazarus, being an astute businessman, noticed that furniture is pretty sturdy and long-lasting. But toys tend to be the exact opposite. The focus of the business soon became toys, and in 1957, Toys R Us was born.
So
anyone know where the name Toys R Us comes from? Well, obviously it conveys that they're in the toy business, but any ideas to why those three words are combined in such a strange way? And why it uses the letter R? Well, let me repeat the founder's name. Charles Lazarus. Did I just blow your mind?
What?
Another fun fact.
Yeah, you did.
Any guesses as to why the R is backwards?
No.
Well, Charles Lazarus was a big fan of the band Korn. Okay, one of those two facts was true and the other was a lame joke. You decide which is which. A few years later, Jeffrey the Giraffe was created as the company's mascot. He was originally named Dr. G. Raff, so I'm sure you can understand why they renamed him. In 1978, Toys R Us went public, meaning anyone could become a partial owner through the purchase of some stock. 5 years later, they made a logical expansion with the creation of Kids R Us, a clothing store for kids. I actually don't care for this name as much because the name Toys R Us identifies what they sell, whereas Kids R Us identifies their target customer. But kids are also the target customer for Toys R Us. My vote would have been to name it Clothes R Us, since people recognize the R Us part as targeting kids. The clothes part lets you know what they sell, and it follows the same naming format established by Toys R Us. But I suppose most company names don't describe what they sell anyway, so I'm sure there were other factors responsible for its demise in 2003. But I can't get into them right now. This video is about Toys R Us, not Kids R Us. I've already spent too much time on Kids R Us. 1996 marked the beginning of Babies R Us, which, despite having the same naming issues as Kids R Us, still stands today. In 2005, the company was taken off the stock market and transformed into a private company when it was purchased in a leveraged buyout. And in September of 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. This is a
appreciate Toys R Us because it's been around for 70 years. 70. It's just a lot, man.
Is a company that began 60 years ago with roots going even further back. A company that became the standard for toys. Anytime within the last 30 years, including today, if Family Feud were to survey 100 people and ask them to name a toy store, the #1 answer on the board would be Toys R Us. And as of this week, this company has filed for bankruptcy. So, how on earth did this happen? The short answer is that they have too much debt.
Yeah.
But that's a no-brainer. Of course they have too much debt. Why else would they file for bankruptcy? So then in my mind, the real question becomes, how did they get so much debt? So let's try to figure out this one together. Dora the Explorer style. Here's a graph that shows their long-term debt over the past 14 years.
They don't have that much debt.
Which year do you think we should further investigate to try to find out where all this debt came from? Well, it certainly appears that something happened between 2005 and 2006. And I actually already told you what it was. In 2005, the company went private through a leveraged buyout. A leveraged buyout is when you buy a company using a bunch of debt. I can best explain it through an example. Say I wanted to buy Toys R Us. The selling price is $10 million, but I only have $1 million. So I go to the bank and try to get a loan for the remaining $9 million. But it turns out I need a pretty good collateral in order to take out a $9 million loan. So I think a minute about what I have that's of any value. My car probably won't cover it. Oh, I know. How about Toys R Us? If I get the loan, I'll own Toys R Us, and that can be my collateral. So I get the loan, and now I have two things. I own Toys R Us, but I also have $9 million in debt. But really, Toys R Us has $9 million in debt.
Wow.
This is an incredibly simplified version of what happened in 2005, but it didn't cost $10 million. It cost $6.6 billion, most of which was paid for through loans that went right on the balance sheet of Toys R Us. So that explains the huge debt increase. Now, at this point, I'm sure you're saying, well, that sounds risky, and you're completely right. Think of it as taking out a mortgage to buy a house. Once you do that, you better have a reliable source of income, because as soon as the cash flow stops, you're liable to lose your home. Same with Toys R Us. As long as the cash flow situation is fine, there's no worries. But once it slows down, well, here we are. This is from the website Investopedia. Leveraged buyouts have had a notorious history, especially in the 1980s, when several prominent buyouts led to the eventual bankruptcy of the acquired companies. This was mainly due to...
So before we end this is going to be the end right here. But before we do go, Toys R Us is failing debt. So they're out of debt. They got a lot of debt. But the other thing is I learned is, it's electronics these days. They're keeping Toys R Us like this, and they're shutting down. It's either you had to say, you know what, let's sell electronics, or, I guess we have to shut down. So their only choice was to shut down in their debt. So I think that's about it, guys, for today. Goodbye.